Welcome to Nice and Blunt. Here we are. I think we're rolling. I think it's good. Pretty sure. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's what is it? Wednesday, I believe. No, it's Thursday, August 10th at around 3:30 p.m. Minneapolis time. And this will be a fun video. Going to break down all of my exposure for the running back position so far on Underdog. In the past, I've edited these videos, but to be completely honest with you, I don't really have much time, drive, energy to edit anywhere near as much as I have in the past. So we're going to utilize the live streams, and we're going to get some content out for you. And I think this one's going to be beneficial. I want to get this one out before those preseason games start, and they kick off really tonight. The Hall of Fame game doesn't really count. So we're going to go through my running back exposure here on Underdog. It's best ball drafts, so keep that in mind. That does kind of skew the strategy a little bit. You are kind of chasing upside a little bit more, the spike weeks. And because there is no waiver wire, you cannot pick up or drop any players over the course of the season. You need to make those bets on some of the players that may not emerge until later in the season. So we're going to go through a lot of different players in this video. As you can see, I've drafted 111 teams so far in the NFL 2023 season. There are some extra drafts I've done before the NFL draft and also for Superflex. I've actually done close to like 150, to be completely honest with you, on Underdog. None of them have been more than like $7, $10. The overwhelming majority are $3 and $5 drafts. There are a few tournaments for $4. So much more on the cheaper, low-stakes buy-ins, but that's all the info I think we need to set this up. Oh, there's one other thing. When it comes to exposure, you are one of 12 teams drafting on Underdog. All the drafts I've done are 12-person leagues. So because of that, in order for a player to really meet the threshold of someone I'm excited about drafting, I need to have taken them a minimum of 8%. Once it's above 8.3%, then it's actually like a legitimate investment that I'm making. I'm taking them at least average. And then once we go above 10, 12%, those are the players I really, really love. So what we're going to do is we're going to work our way backwards, and we're going to start with the players I haven't really drafted that much. And I'm going to give you very like minimal insight into those guys, explain why I don't really want them. And as we get closer to the top, I will go a little bit more in-depth on these players. But the first guy we're going to mention is Kenneth Walker, who I think this exposure might be a little disrespectful, but 0.9%. I've only taken him once in over 100 drafts. I feel like this, I may regret this a little bit, but I don't love the 5th round ADP, and boy, Zach Charbonnet scares the shit out of me. Charbonnet is a player I am really, really high on. So I am really steering clear of Kenneth Walker, and I think you should too. I'm really not excited to draft him. I barely have him as like a top 20 running back. He's hovering in my ranks around like 20, 21, 22, and he's going off the board at RB 17. I like to have at least a running back earlier and then fill out depth. It's not a great ADP, in my opinion, at the early 5th round. But aside from him, another big name player that I've barely ever drafted is Christian McCaffrey. Boy, I got a bad feeling about that San Francisco backfield. The last time we saw the 49ers starting running back in week 1 finish the season completely healthy and keep that job was Carlos Hyde in 2017. That's 6+ years ago, and maybe it's something to not be worried about because McCaffrey either plays a full season or misses 10+ games. I have a feeling he might go down with injury. He is getting a little bit up there in age. He's entering his 27-year season, and because you have to draft him so high at 3rd overall, in a format where you have to start 3 wide receivers, if I'm drafting top 5, I'd much rather grab a wide receiver. Even Cooper Kupp with that hamstring injury is a player I'd much rather take. So that's why CMC is extremely low on my exposure. But another guy, I'm kind of proud about this at the moment to have so little of him. It's Jonathan Taylor, who I've only taken 2.7% of the time. I am really worried that Anthony Richardson is not going to check it down. anywhere near as much as Taylor has seen in the past. I mean, there was already a big dip in receptions last year. With a career high of 40 2 seasons ago, you really need his rushing upside to hit. And maybe the efficiency is there with a rushing quarterback that might help a little bit, but I'm really worried the efficiency wasn't there. Only 4 touchdowns last season, less than 1,000 yards on the year. And with that contract dispute, there's potential that he misses time due to holdout. I am very worried. It's possible he gets traded. We don't know what the hell is going to go on with Taylor. And I'm kind of happy that I haven't taken him too much. Another guy I haven't taken almost at all is Aaron Jones. Only 3 shares of him. I much more prefer A.J. Dillon. Jones is also getting up there in age. And in the early 5th round, I don't love this ADP either. I view him almost identically to Kenneth Walker. Both of their backups, I think, are legitimate threats. And I also don't believe in the Packers and Jordan Love this season. I am very much off of Aaron Jones this year. But Rhamondre Stevenson, also a player who is being drafted in the 3rd round, pretty high investment that I'm just not really taking. I don't really believe in the Bill O'Brien offense being that much of an upgrade over last year. His touchdowns were a little bit rare, and while he did catch 69 receptions, that's very good. I just don't fully trust it. I don't love this offense. And when was the last time a Patriots running back was actually top 10? It's been a long time. You need the touchdowns to pay off in order for Rhamondre Stevenson to hit. And I'm just not really a believer, so I have not really been drafting much of Rhamondre Stevenson. Pacheco, a guy who is going in the top 100. I'm just not super excited about it. Doesn't really catch passes, is still in a heavy committee, so not too excited about it. However, Bijan Robinson, who I have at 4.5%, kind of wish I had a little bit more of Bijan. I've been trying to take him a little bit more late. As of late, but RB3 I think is still a little bit pricey. I have him as a top 5 running back, but I'm still a little bit worried about Tyler Algier until Patterson gets cut or injured. I think that could also be a little bit of a factor. And because you have to take Bijan in the 1st round, I usually go wide receiver above him, like A.J. Brown, C.D. Lamb. I do prefer on underdog. So if we're in a regular redraft format with only 2 starting wide receivers as opposed to 3, I'd probably have a lot more Bijan, closer to at least 8%, but only have him at 4.5, not super high on Bijan. Akers is also in this range. I'm a little bit worried about that offense being super pass heavy. He doesn't really catch many passes. That isn't his bread and butter. And all of his usage last year really came when they were a terrible team with Baker Mayfield at the end of the season. So we've yet to see a full year of Cam Akers fully produce, and I don't hate taking him, but I can't say I take him at least the average that you're supposed to. He's not a guy that I'm like super, super high on. So the 6th round is still where I prefer to go quarterback. Like I love Trevor Lawrence in that range. I like George Kittle if he falls to me. I love JSN over there. And that's one reason why I rarely take running back in round 6. Miles Sanders, also a player I'm not super, super high on. Hard to trust him staying healthy. He isn't an elite touchdown producer. And today, it looks like he has a groin injury. We don't know how long that's going to impede him. Probably not that big of a deal, but not a player I'm super, super high on who is going inside the top 100. Jacobs, I've been definitely moving off of since the contract dispute. I've been worried about it for quite a while, and unless he falls to me in the late 3rd round, not super high on Jacobs. Travis Etienne, though, another player I'm a little bit lightweight on. I'm really worried about Tank Bigsby, to be completely honest with you. He's been really pushing for touches, a very good pass catcher. And Etienne, I don't think is a player that they want to give a full workhorse 3-down role to. If you remember that game, I want to say like week 12 or 13. Let's take a look at Etienne's game log real quick. There was a game where he played like 4 or 5 snaps and then came off the field. And even though he was perfectly healthy, they held him out. Yeah, he played 5 snaps in week 12 against Baltimore, and he wasn't injured. Like, he could have returned, but they just held him out. I think that's a little emblematic of what they want to do with Etienne, keep him healthy. He did have that Achilles injury, if I recall correctly, as a rookie that held him out of his first season in the NFL. And I think generally This 24, 28 touch workload that we saw leading up to that, I think is what they want to prevent. They also held him out a little bit towards the end of the season to prep for the playoffs. I don't think they want to give him a true 3-down role, so I'm a little bit worried about Etienne's early 4th-round ADP. If you're in a jam, if you haven't drafted running back up to that point, then I don't mind it. But again, I am underweight on Travis Etienne for those reasons. So not super excited, a little bit more careful to take him. I'm very high on Calvin Ridley. I love Trevor Lawrence. I love the passing game, and the rushing attack in Jacksonville kind of worries me a little bit. Their offensive line is not the best in the league. But Derrick Henry, I also have at 5.4%, and it looks like in the poll so far, I don't know how many votes, but at least one vote so far, and 100% of the votes agree with my logic. I do not believe Derrick Henry is going to play a full season this year. Let's just take a look at Derrick Henry's game log real quick. We're going to touch on a lot of running backs in this video, so this one might go kind of long. But remember, there's really only been one season where Derrick Henry has suffered an injury. And here, let me move myself a little bit. We can probably get rid of the subscribe button. Okay, so in 2021, 2 years ago, Derrick Henry played 8 games coming off a year where he had 397 touches. He has almost 2,000 on his career, 1,877 so far. And last year he had 382. If he didn't miss that game in Week 17 against the Cowboys, he would have eclipsed 400. And that, I think, is a big red flag in terms of my concern for Derrick Henry's usage and the likelihood that he may miss time again, go down with injury, not play a full season this year. So I'm a little bit worried about Derrick Henry and that workload. He's going to be 30 in January. Last year I wasn't worried to draft him, but this year I am, and I've only taken him 6 times through 111 drafts. In the 3rd round, I'm a little bit more comfortable if he's my RB1, but these days you kind of have to take him in the mid to late 2nd round. He has been rising in ADP, so I have definitely been moving off of him much more recently, and I do worry about Derrick Henry quite a bit with that age racking up. The tread on the tires, figuratively speaking, is getting a little bit slim. But another guy I'm not like super in love with, part of it is because his ADP has drastically risen since the beginning of the preseason, of the offseason, I should say. It's Alexander Mattison. He's never been able to stay healthy. And maybe I'm just bitter about a few years ago, back in, I want to say 2020, when I had Dalvin Cook, who got me to the playoffs, got injured, and I pivoted to Mattison, and Mattison went down with injury like immediately. Mattison is not a player I like fully feel confident is going to be able to supplant Dalvin Cook for that workload. I think Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride might get a few more touches than we're expecting. And similar to Cam Akers and Miles Sanders, that late 5th round, early 6th round ADP is just not something that I'm like super in love with. So Mattison is not a guy I've been drafting heavily. But Kamara, I kind of wish I had more of Kamara. I was expecting more of a 6-game suspension for him, and only recently have I started to pivot back to drafting him. Only 3 games, so he will miss some time, but he's really talented. Those receptions are going to be clutch, and I don't believe in Michael Thomas. I think he could be possibly the 2nd most valuable pass catcher on this team. The Saints should be a playoff team this year. I think they'll at least be a wild card team, if not a 9-10 win team. And in the NFC, that will definitely get you into the playoffs. I think they'll be better early on with Derek Carr kind of with a chip on his shoulder, given how that whole Raider situation unfolded. Him getting cut was big motivation for him. But now we're starting to approach 8%, and these are players that I am a little bit more comfortable taking. J.K. Dobbins going in the mid to late 6th round. That's where I start getting a little more comfortable, especially if he falls to me. Very happy to take J.K. Dobbins. I am a believer in the Baltimore offense this year, and at the end of the day, they're still a run-first team. Dobbins has elite efficiency. Last year, I want to say he ran for 6+ yards per carry, and he's been really productive ever since his college days at Ohio State. Let's give you the exact number. So far, in 2 years of game action, he has a 5.9 yard per carry average. That is elite efficiency. He doesn't really catch a ton of passes, but last year it dwindled less than half of what he put up back in 2020. And remember, he's been ravaged with injuries. There are a lot of factors involved with his lack of production. I think this year, starting fully healthy, I believe in J.K. Dobbins. A little bit worried about Gus Edwards. Obviously, Lamar Jackson can always vulture some touchdowns, but Dobbins is a guy I trust. And when he gets going, he can put up 100-plus yards very, very easily because of those elite yards per carry numbers. Let's remind you real quick of what J.K. Dobbins could do back in college. His stats at Ohio State were really, really something. His junior season, he put up 2,000 rushing yards in 14 games, 21 rushing touchdowns, also caught a minimum of 22 receptions all 3 seasons. So it's not the fact that he can't catch passes. It's just the fact that the Ravens haven't quite utilized him in that way. And if that can shift, if that can go up this year, if he can catch maybe like 3-4 receiving touchdowns, I think J.K. Dobbins could be a top 12 running back perhaps if things fall his way. So I like him a lot. There's a lot of receiving weapons that the defense is going to have to account for, and I think that's going to keep them honest. I think he's going to see fewer stacked boxes, and if hypothetically, if Gus Edwards were to ever go down, he would see a massive, massive workload. So I like J.K. Dobbins. I kind of wish I had a little more of him, but remember, round 6 is not really where I'm like dying to take running back. I alternate between him and Dameon Pierce quite a bit. Pierce is very efficient. It's really just a matter of he didn't score touchdowns last season, but he was on a tear, and I do not worry about Devin Singletary. I think their offense is going to be better this season. Probably not a playoff team in the loaded AFC, but CJ Stroud is going to make that team better, and Dameon Pierce should have better efficiency, should get in the end zone a little bit more, so his numbers should improve. I think he's going to return more of an investment than RB22. That's what his ADP would suggest here. That's where he's being drafted. I think that would be a guy I'd like to have a little bit more, kind of similar to J.K. Dobbins. But now we've officially hit the threshold where I am actually drafting these players with like legitimate confidence. This is the threshold where it should be a minimum of 8% in a 12-team league type of exposure. So Dalvin Cook, a guy I'm willing to take a shot on. We don't know where he's going to land, but as long as it's not the Jets, I think he could have a massive role. I'm hoping that it's Miami. I'm really hoping that that's the case. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's somewhere else, but he still doesn't have a team. And when he visited the Jets, he did not leave with a contract, so it's still very much up in the air. At some point, someone's going to get hurt, right? Like, there's going to be a running back that's injured. He's the best guy on the market to fill that type of role, and he's had 4 straight seasons with at least 1,000 yards. He is very productive. He's a type of home run hitter that I would like to take a bet on because his ADP is really reasonable. Pick 96 overall. That is the late 8th round, if not the top of the 9th round. I like Dalvin Cook's ADP quite a bit. I'm not afraid to draft him. I'm not afraid to draft his brother James Cook either. I have him at 8.1%, and there's been some really good reviews about him in training camp. I loved him as a prospect last year, but I was a little bit worried that maybe Dameon Harris might steal a lot of touchdowns. That does not look like to be the case. Dameon Harris is not having a very good camp, and James Cook could possibly have more of a 3-down role on this offense. Very high scoring, very elite potential. Devin Singletary's gone, and they also brought in Latavius Murray. That's a little bit of a reason to hesitate as well, but the ADP of running back 28, I think, is very reasonably priced. Definitely a player I'm not afraid to draft. And to be honest, I would like to have him a little bit more because he has been rising in the ADP. At the beginning of the 8th, I think he's absolutely a player you can take. I'd rather have him than Alvin Kamara, to be completely honest with you. But Joe Mixon, a player I was drafting a lot back in like May when his ADP was super, super low, in April as well when there was the lawsuit kind of hanging over his head. I'm a little bit worried that they bring in a running back like Zeke, perhaps. Zeke played for Ohio State. It's possible he wants to go back to Ohio and chase a ring. And then there's also the factor that Joe Burrow has that calf strain. We don't know how much time he's going to miss, if any. That could be a little bit of a problem. But one stat that really kind of concerns me for Joe Mixon is his touchdowns last season. Only 9 total touchdowns. But if you recall, let's pull up his game log real quick. Joe Mixon had one of the highest spike weeks of all last season at the running back position. If you recall, it was week 9 against Carolina, a very porous run defense, where he put up 153 yards rushing on 7 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns, also another 58 yards on 4 receptions receiving, and a 5th touchdown in the air. So if you remove those 5 touchdowns in week 9, he only scored 4 touchdowns on the season in his other 13 games. That is very low efficiency. You know this offense throws it a ton, especially in the red zone. I am a little bit worried about Joe Mixon's touchdown efficiency. Maybe you believe that that's going to come back to average, kind of closer to the 16 touchdowns he had before, but his efficiency didn't go up as much as I would have expected given the upgraded offensive line last year. And while 60 receptions is very nice, I can't say I love drafting him in the middle of the 4th. That's a round that has really good receivers, and I kind of prefer to go with a wide receiver instead. I also kind of like Chase Brown, the rookie they drafted, I want to say 5th, 6th round out of University of Illinois. However, Mixon should be fine. I think running back 15 is probably where he's going to finish, but I can't say I'm like super convinced he's going to be top 10 this year. Those touchdowns last year really had me a little concerned. That's my main hesitancy with Joe Mixon. But at 8.1%, I'm not like completely avoiding him. I'm just not hammering that pick all day long. Khalil Herbert, though, the RB1 in Chicago, while he is in a committee, while he does have a running quarterback that could really limit his touches, his volume, Dave Montgomery's gone. I think they trust Herbert the most so far. And while they did bring in Deontay Foreman, they also drafted Roschon Johnson. I think he has the clear-cut, most surefire bet to have that first and second down role, get the most touches at running back. And he's being drafted at pick 116, running back 39 overall off the board. I can easily see him outperforming that ADP. I think Khalil Herbert is a very good value in the 10th round. I'm not afraid to reach on him, and especially if I draft Justin Fields, I'm not like super excited, but I'm not afraid to take him and invest more in the Chicago offense. I think they could sneak into the playoffs if they can manage to get 9 wins. I think the Bears are going to hover right around 500. This season, they're going to be much more improved than last year, especially if they can stay healthy. So those are the running backs I'm kind of tepid on. Now we enter the 9% threshold. Gibson is kind of interesting because of his pass-catching prowess. J.D. McKissick is gone. However, Brian Robinson has actually been getting some good reviews. He might be a little bit more involved in the passing game this season. So Gibson, not a terrible investment, but a guy who I was drafting a lot more of when his ADP was like 10 picks later than it is right now, right at 100, RB32. That's okay. That's fine, especially in best ball. I'm not afraid to take him if I need running back in his range. But Jamaal Williams, I was a little more excited to take him when I thought Kamara might be suspended for 6 games, and that has been diminished to only 3. So I'm a little bit off of him. Kendry Miller, now that he's healthy in training camp, does worry me a little bit, but he did score 17 touchdowns last season, and Kamara is going to be more of a pass catcher this year. He should have a solid role on the goal line. As the RB42 off the board, I'm not afraid to take Jamaal Williams. But Kenny Gainwell, a pretty solid bet against DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny. Neither of them have been able to stay healthy. This is a loaded backfield, though. There's a lot of options. His ADP is just so late. I'm not afraid to take him. But James Conner, very polarizing player. It's hard to really trust in the Arizona offense, but he has been a elite touchdown maker over the last 2 seasons. He has missed some time. That's usually something you can bet on for James Conner to not stay fully healthy. But, I mean, let's just do some math here. 10, 11, 26 touchdowns for James Conner in the last 2 seasons since he's joined the Cardinals. And while this offense may not score very much without Kyler Murray, his usage last year when Kyler Murray went down was really, really elite. Let's remind you of what his stats were looking like following his injury last season when he came back in Week 9. A little bit of a slow start in Week 9, but starting in Week 10, an average of 20 touches per game, either a minimum of 14 rush attempts, but almost 5 targets like clockwork, and the majority of these games were with Colt McCoy under center. A touchdown almost every single week, starting in Week 10. 2 touchdowns, 1 touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown, another touchdown, another touchdown, another touchdown. Week 17, that touchdown streak was snapped, but still an average of a touchdown per game without Kyler Murray once he returned from injury. So that's the upside with James Conner, a reason why I'm not afraid to draft him at all. And at 9%, I'm okay with it, but there are some running backs in his same range that I prefer. I think RB26, very reasonable for James Conner. So I'm not afraid to take him, but maybe not my favorite player. Chase Brown, though, a rookie I mentioned when I brought up Joe Mixon, I have taken one instance more than Joe Mixon. It's pretty good insurance, especially right now with Travion Williams going down with injury. He's the only other player in that backfield, and not a bad investment. If Mixon were to ever miss time, we've seen Samaje Perine have really, really productive games as the starter in Cincinnati. But now at 10%, I got Ekeler. I'm not afraid to take him. I am a Chargers fan, so that kind of skews this a little bit. However, one thing I'm worried about, I think those receptions are going to come down kind of heavily. Keenan Allen missed 8 games. Mike Williams missed another 3 games. They drafted Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer is a very underrated number 4 receiver. Gerald Everett, not a bad player as well. There's just so many players to worry about that can also catch passes, and they changed the offensive coordinator. They're not going to check it down anywhere near as much as they did with Joe Lombardi last year. Kellen Moore's going to push it down the field. I think Ekeler will be more efficient running the ball. I don't think his touchdowns are going to go anywhere. I think he's still going to score 15 plus, so that's not why I'm worried about him. But I can't imagine he catches 100 plus receptions this season. He is, I want to say, 27, 28. Let's just remind ourselves of Eckler's age. He is 28. He turned 28 in May. That is also a little bit of a red flag, something to consider. So that is one reason why I'm not like hammering him in the first round, but at 10%, I'm not afraid to take him either. It's just a matter of, does he fall to me? I'd rather not reach on him. His ADP is number 7. So if he falls to me at like pick 9, pick 10, very, very happy to take Ekeler. But that's only if, some of the receivers have gone off the board ahead of him. But above 10%, we have DeAndre Swift, a player with elite upside. Looks like he's going to catch a lot of passes in this offense, but there's a heavy committee. So when I have Jalen Hurts, I'm happy to stack him, but I'm a little bit worried about the ability for him to stay healthy. That's not really been the case. He hasn't played a single season that included all 16, 17 games, so you can kind of expect him to miss a little bit of time. But in the first 2 games last year for Detroit, before he got hurt, he was putting up 20 fantasy points per game on only 14 touches, 10 carries, 4 targets in those first 2 games, also scoring a touchdown every single game. Even when he came back from injury, he was scoring at a pretty decent rate, but Jamaal Williams was the main guy. DeAndre Swift's injury concerns are a reason to stay away, but still that upside is truly elite. If he can score a bunch of touchdowns, if he can stay healthy, he could easily finish top 20, maybe even top 15, and have a season like Miles Sanders last year, especially in best ball, those spike weeks. Very, very valuable. But in round 2, the players I'm most tempted to draft would be Saquon Barkley. Love Saquon, especially now that the contract dispute is over. If he does hit those incentives that he signed, he would have an even better season statistically than he did last year. He didn't catch a single receiving touchdown either, so that should go up. And then 10 rushing touchdowns, I think, is kind of money in the bank. As long as he stays healthy, he should be just as good, if not better, and that will return the RB5 investment that you need to take on him, especially if you're at the end of the first round. Like, let's say you have pick 11, which I did in my last draft, I love to take Saquon at the top of round 2 because the quality of running back coming back around to you in rounds 3 and 4 is nowhere near the ceiling that Saquon offers. And I think that position really, really falls off a cliff following the second mid-third round. And I'd much rather have at least one running back I trust in the first 15 picks. If I can get Saquon, very happy to have him. But if I don't get Saquon, I'm just as comfortable taking Tony Pollard. They still have not brought in another running back. It's possible that they bring in Zeke, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And it's not like you can tell me that you trust Malik Davis or Deuce Vaughn to really limit his touches. I'm a little bit worried coming off of that injury. He broke his leg in that playoff game against San Francisco that, maybe he can't handle a massive 300-touch workload. I mean, last year he barely saw 240 touches, less than that, and he did go down in the playoffs. He's not a guy that we've ever seen carry 20-plus touches per game and, really do it on an elite workhorse level. So I'm a little bit worried about it in that regard, but Zeke scored 12 touchdowns last season, and he's gone. Most of those are going to go to Pollard. He scored 12 last year, so I think that's kind of his floor. A little bit worried about the Mike McCarthy offense. Like, Kellen Moore, no longer the coordinator in Dallas, really scares me. But they're still a run-first team. Like, that's typically their identity, and he doesn't have much competition. Pollard is also a very explosive player. His yards per carry numbers have been above 5 pretty much throughout his entire career. Back in 2020, it was 4.3, but all 3 other seasons, it was at least 5.2 yards per carry. He's extremely explosive. He is a home run hitter, and he also catches passes. He should score a lot of touchdowns, should be very efficient. I definitely want to draft him as a top 10 running back, and RB6, I think, is a fair ranking on him. I'm not afraid to take Pollard in the middle to late second round if he's available. But now we're moving up another tier where I have Zamir White, a very interesting option, especially if Josh Jacobs does hold out, does miss any time. He's getting way more reps in practice this season. Last year, only has 17 touches. He really didn't have a chance to show what he can do. But very good pedigree from Georgia. I love Georgia running backs, and I was very high on him. He was my RB4 rookie prospect last year in the draft. So I believe in him. It's just a matter of, does he get the opportunity? And especially when he was going in round 18, I was taking him quite a bit. I have drafted him on one of the live streams in the past. I mean, RB58 in best ball, why not take a shot? You don't have access to the waiver wire. If Jacobs goes down, he has the clear path to the RB1 role and could put up top 20 numbers if that was the case. And it's worth taking a shot on Zamir White. But Zach Charbonnet, I also have above 10% at 11.7. I mentioned Kenneth Walker at the top of this video. Not a player I believe in, not a player I want to draft, and it's because I love Charbonnet. Let me, holy shit. Charbonnet's profile is really impressive. I was a little bit disappointed that he went to Seattle because it's a very significant committee there behind Kenneth Walker. Walker is very talented, but he's 6', 214, so durability is not a problem. He also played all 4 years in college, so he is really good in pass protection. I think he has that third down role on lock. He's also a very good catcher of the football. 37 receptions last year for a running back. That's really, really good. 24 the year prior. And a total of 1,680 yards last season for UCLA in only 10 games. Those are elite numbers on a per-game basis. 168 yards from scrimmage on a per-game basis in college. Holy shit. That's all you need to tell me. He is really, really good. And as you can see, he was number 7 in terms of the athleticism score last year on Player Profiler. He's not the fastest player, but once he gets moving, once he's going downhill, you do not want to tackle this guy. He is a bruiser, and I think if Walker were to ever go down, he would put up top 10 numbers immediately. So his comp is DeMarco Murray. There's potential for massive, massive touches if that holds true. And while his stats aren't maybe like elite in terms of percentile, they're nothing to scoff at. He's very, very talented, and I really love Charbonnet. Maybe it's my LA bias, but I'm more of a SC Trojan fan than a UCLA Bruin fan. So it's not like I was glued to the television watching him last year. But I really like Charbonnet. His ADP way more acceptable than Kenneth Walker's, going as RB35, pick 105 off the board, especially if he falls to me closer to pick 110. I love to take Charbonnet as my RB4, even as my RB5, not afraid to do it at all. Love Charbonnet's upside, and his floor should be pretty good. I think he has a pretty solid, pretty big role in this offense. But Najee Harris, I also have in the same tier at 11.7%. A little bit worried that maybe Jaylen Warren could eat into his volume a little bit. But there's some very consistent touchdown numbers for Najee Harris. Over the last 2 years, he scored 7 rushing, 3 receiving touchdowns. And it's possible that his reception numbers vault up closer to 74 that they were at when he was a rookie. I think last year, especially with all the growing pains with Trubisky under center for a few weeks and then Kenny Pickett not really getting established for a while, Najee did miss out in that regard. But one other reason why I'm excited about him, not afraid to draft him at his RB13 ADP, is the fact that they drafted Broderick Jones out of Georgia on the offensive line. That's a big upgrade, a big problem for the Steelers, and something that's really limited him in terms of efficiency. Najee Harris has been very unproductive from a yards per carry standpoint so far in the NFL. The last 2 seasons, he hasn't even cracked 4 yards per carry, 3.8 last year. Really not impressive. I expect that to go up. And if we see, let's say, 4.3 yards per carry, I'll pull out the calculator, do a little quick math, and his usage doesn't go up. Let's say he sees 270 touches yet again, times 4.3 yards per carry. That would bring him back closer to his rookie season, where he saw 1,200 yards rushing. The exact number would be 1,161 if he can bump his yards per carry closer to league average at 4.3. Maybe it's going to be even higher. Maybe I am wrong. But let's take a look at his game log real quick, because the last 9 games for the Steelers were the ones that really counted. That is when Kenny Pickett really started to get going, and his usage numbers really started to pop. 20 carries, 10, 17, 12, 24, 16, 22, 23 to close the season. And then in terms of the touchdowns, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. So that is where the bread and butter really hit for Najee Harris in terms of fantasy points. He also started to see more receptions and targets, like a few games with 6 targets here, 9 targets in week 16. And I have run the numbers. During this 9-game stretch where the Steelers went 7-2, made that playoff push. They didn't make the playoffs, but they were way better to start the season. They went 2-6 to start the year. They finished 7-2 record-wise. That's when Kenny Pickett was really rolling. That's when Najee Harris was getting his touches. He was averaging 14.4 fantasy points per game in half PPR, and those are top 10, at least top 12 numbers. I want to say they're top 10, but at least where he's going in the ADP is lower than what those stats would suggest. So if you do get 14 fantasy points per game from Najee Harris, then drafting him in the 4th round is very safe, definitely going to pay off, and doesn't carry much risk. So hopefully he doesn't get hurt. I don't think that's going to happen. I think 10 touchdowns has been his floor the last 2 seasons. That's what's going to repeat this year. Najee Harris, pretty solid investment. But another guy that I mentioned earlier that I have not been drafting a lot is Aaron Jones, and that's because, similar to Zach Charbonnet, I have been taking A.J. Dillon quite considerably. Dillon has 7 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons, at least 186 rush attempts in back-to-back years as well, and while his receiving numbers went down a little bit, I wouldn't be shocked if they went up a little bit this season, because Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. A.J. Dillon, we've been praying for the breakout. Last year, we all thought it was going to come, and that's why he was drafted in round like 5, 6 last year, and we all got screwed. He did not pay off at all. But he was still okay from a floor standpoint. He really started to pay off at the end of the season, and especially as we get closer to the end of the year, especially as the weather gets colder and Aaron Jones starts to get more and more banged up. A.J. Dillon should repeat his usage on the goal line yet again. Look at these touchdown numbers starting in Week 12. 1 rushing touchdown, 1, 2, 1, 1. That, I think, is a little bit more emblematic of the role he's going to have. While it may not be elite from a volume standpoint, especially when they get close on the goal line, I think A.J. Dillon will be more involved. I think he will crack 10 touchdowns this season, and that is why I think his ADP of running back 33 is at least fair, if not underrated, because we know he has top 10 upside. If Aaron Jones were to ever go down on Underdog, you want to chase that ceiling, and that's why A.J. Dillon could possibly be a league winner at pick 101 overall. But let's keep it moving. We still have several players to mention. We are starting to get close to the end of this video, but 2 Cleveland Browns that I cannot stop drafting would be Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, both coming in at 13.5%. Nick Chubb is really the guy that you want. Nick Chubb is just so safe, a minimum of 8 rushing touchdowns every single season. Let's pull up his stats real quick. Nick Chubb is the image of consistency. As a rookie, 10 touchdowns, then 8 touchdowns, 12, 9, 13. And he's only missed, 3 games 2 years ago, 4 games the season before. That's a total of 7 missed games through 5 seasons. That's less than 2 on average. Nick Chubb always stays healthy. He also always puts up like 100 yards per game. He is really, really trustworthy. And with no Kareem Hunt, his usage in the passing game should go up. While maybe it's not going to be elite, the most targets he's ever seen was 49 back as a sophomore in the NFL. That's still respectable. I think that's definitely what we could see this year, about 50 targets for Nick Chubb. And the touchdowns should be there for him, just like last year with 13. I think that's probably his floor. At least 11, 12 is what you should expect from Nick Chubb. This offense should be better with a fully healthy, fully ready to go Deshaun Watson. There's no suspension for their quarterback this season. So I like Nick Chubb, and we've seen Dearness Johnson, Kareem Hunt have elite upside if he were to ever go down. That's the logic with Jerome Ford. And then there's also a possibility that Jerome Ford has a little bit more of a Kareem Hunt role, given the fact that Nick Chubb can't stay on the field every single snap. He does come off the field, kind of hovers around 20 touches per game, not much more than that. And there should be some usage for Jerome Ford that makes this RB52 ADP something I'm willing to bet on. Even if he only gets like 1 or 2 games as the starter, he could easily put up 20-plus fantasy points, as we've seen Dearness Johnson do in the past. So not afraid to take a shot on the Cleveland run game. They have a very good offensive line, very good run scheme. Kevin Stefanski knows how to use his running backs. But now we are getting closer to 15%. These are players I really love. And I mentioned my trepidation with Etienne going in the 4th round. I love Tank Bigsby, who should have a very heavy role on 3rd down. Let's just read this little blurb from 2 days ago where he is pushing for touches. Coach Doug Peterson said Saturday that Bigsby is a sponge in addition to his size, speed, and athleticism. John Shipley of Sports Illustrated reports. The rookie 3rd-round pick made a strong impression in rookie camp and has performed similarly in training camp. Etienne was Jacksonville's workhorse tailback last season after James Robinson was shipped to the Jets and was expected to have a similar role in 2023, but Bigsby could see consistent touches week to week if he continues to build on the early foundation he's laid. So he is really impressive. Let's take a look at Bigsby's stats, who I have gone over on the channel before, but he's really good at catching passes. 30 receptions last year, 21 the season prior, and at least 10 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. He is very efficient, definitely a player I'm excited about. Really safe pick, in my opinion, as your RB4, especially if you draft Trevor Lawrence, one of my favorite quarterbacks this year. I think the stack with Bigsby out of the backfield is a little bit more valuable than Travis Etienne in round 4. Remember, I love the wide receiver value in the 4th round, and that's why I want a piece of this backfield, but I'd much rather go with Tank Bigsby than Travis Etienne. Next on the list at 15.3%, 17 shares so far, it's Rachaad White, my number 3 rookie running back prospect 2 years ago. I really, really trust Rachaad White from a volume standpoint. They got rid of Leonard Fournette, and while Rachaad White caught 50 receptions last year, Fournette caught like 60 plus himself. So yes, I know that was with Tom Brady. That's not going to be the case very much, but there is truly elite volume upside, especially in the passing game. We're going to see a ton of garbage time in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, and I think in the fourth quarter, Rachaad White is going to eat when it comes to receptions and touches. His efficiency is also pretty good. Let's just take a look at his game log real quick. It was really that game in Germany where he started to pop, started to show what he could do. He put up really good numbers in that Seattle game where he was the starter, and he was technically the starter moving forward in that offense. So they were already starting to pivot off of Leonard Fournette starting in week 10. But 22 for 105, didn't see any work in the passing game, but then moving forward, 9 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, 2, 4, 5. That's something that you could easily see again repeat for Rachaad White. I trust his volume because there isn't a single free agent running back that's going to sign in Tampa. If anything, they're going to try and chase a ring. They're not going to go to the Buccaneers, who are absolutely in the Khalil Williams sweepstakes. And I think Rachaad White is, at least from a floor standpoint, really good. I think he's going to outperform this ADP of running back 27 for sure, but at pick 82, the top of the 8th round, I really feel confident in Rachaad White. I'm not afraid to draft him at all. So that's one player I've liked a lot, but a guy I'm very, very interested in, it's Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. I love this offense. This backfield particularly is really, really high upside because last year, the Detroit Lions running backs scored 27 total touchdowns, including Jamaal Williams, DeAndre Swift, and I'm forgetting his name. The former Charger. Why am I forgetting his name? Anyway, you probably know who I'm talking about. But overall, as a unit, they scored 27 touchdowns. They have a top 5 offensive line coming into the year, according to PFF, and I really, really trust his upside, especially in those regular redraft formats. I think if you invest in the Detroit Lions that are not named Jameson Williams, they're going to see massive work in those first 6 games because of that suspension for last year's first-round pick, Jameson Williams, who is suspended due to gambling. So I think that's a major reason why they took Jahmyr Gibbs so high in the draft. They took him 12th overall. They believe in him. They want to prove that wasn't a mistake. People were laughing at it. I thought Jahmyr Gibbs was like a legit first-round pick, but I had him going in my mock at number 31 to the Chiefs because my comp for him was Jamaal Charles. He's not as big as Jamaal Charles. He's kind of a little bit smaller version of him, but holy shit, Jamaal Charles. Oh wait, no, we're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs. I got Jamaal Charles. Okay, look, Jamaal Charles' comp is CJ Spiller. Let's go to Jahmyr Gibbs real quick. Guess whose comp for Jahmyr Gibbs' comp is CJ Spiller. So, yes, he's a little bit smaller, only coming in at 5'9", 199, but his speed is elite, the 99th percentile at the running back position, a 4.36 40 for Jahmyr Gibbs. So he can really pop the 92nd percentile in terms of speed score. And when you look at his stats, he transferred from Georgia Tech to Alabama. Alabama running backs are usually really good, but a minimum of 24 receptions since he was a freshman for Georgia Tech, then 35 as a sophomore, and then 44 catches for 444 yards in 12 games last year for Alabama. A total of, I want to say, 12 or so touchdowns. Let's take a look at his rookie profile, his stats last year. Here they have him measured at 5'11". Not sure if that's completely accurate, but it is what it is. Yeah, 10 touchdowns for him, 1,370 yards in a committee, essentially, for Alabama. Those 44 catches, I think, are why I want him so much. With no Jameson Williams, he could easily be the wide receiver 2 in terms of targets for Jared Goff. And if you need to rack up wins at the beginning of the season, going with the Detroit Lions running backs is a very, very beneficial way to do that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, also a player that helps you in that regard. But I am a little bit worried that he is going to be DeAndre Swift 2.0 and could miss some time. That frame, barely at 200 pounds, 199, is not the safest investment, but I think his work as a pass catcher is going to be elite. I could easily see 50, 60-plus receptions for Jahmyr Gibbs this season, and that's why I'm not afraid to draft him as RB12 off the board at the 3-4 turn. I want to take a shot on this Detroit Lions offense, especially the backfield, because they put up 27 total touchdowns last season, and they run behind a top 5 offensive line, as I've mentioned. But we are getting close to the end of this video, but we're still not there yet. Jerrick McKinnon comes in next, also at 16.2%. The stat that I really care about most here is the 56 receptions, 512 receiving yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns. If you had Jerrick McKinnon on your team last year at the end of this season, then he was probably the main reason why you probably made it to the championship, if not won your championship. He was elite as a pass catcher. Pacheco is not a guy I'm worried about. Very few receptions for Pacheco. And while he is 31 years old, you don't have to make a massive investment on him. He's going as RB41, pick 124 off the board. That's not something I'm afraid to do. So especially if I draft Patrick Mahomes, I love this as a stack because his work in the passing game is just really, really valuable. That ceiling of his is truly elite. He was putting up 30 fantasy points in some games back in December of last season. So hopefully he can stay healthy. That is a little bit of a concern at his age, but it's not like CEH scares you, and then Pacheco, not a big pass catcher. Maybe they sign a veteran. Maybe it really derails this, but it's best ball. You're shooting for the ceiling. We are gambling at the end of the day and betting on the Kansas City Chiefs offense. Not a bad way to do it. But, oh boy, this is a player I love. I was so high on last season, and the fact that his ADP has precipitously fallen to RB25. I mean, it's been moving up lately, but it was in the mid to late 80s for a long time. Javonte Williams, absolutely a player I believe in, especially with Sean Payton at head coach. The fact that Javonte Williams is going to play in the preseason and that he's cleared for contact already, I am a full believer in him. I am not afraid to draft him at all. He should stay healthy. I mean, yeah, he's coming off of injury. It's a little bit risky, but literally any single player in the NFL can go down with injury at any single time, and that's not going to limit my desire to draft him because he was one of my guys last year. I couldn't stop taking him last year, and at 16.2%, I kind of can't stop taking him either. That's twice what the average exposure should be, so I've been taking him twice as much, and the fact that he's been rising a lot in the ADP lately, I'm happy I took him a lot earlier on in the offseason because now I've been getting sniped on him quite a bit. I think people are really wising up to Javonte Williams. Let's just take a look at his stats real quick because even as a rookie with Melvin Gordon to compete with, he was catching a ton of passes. He had 53 targets, 43 receptions, and that's why I was such a believer in him last year once Melvin Gordon was gone. I thought that he was going to see like maybe 80-plus targets last season, and he was on pace to do that. He saw 22 in only 4 games, and then he went down with injury. He couldn't score a single touchdown last year, and he was really disappointing from a fantasy standpoint. But he was putting up 8.5 fantasy points per game, and if you add a touchdown per game to that, then it would have been my exact projection of about 14.5 fantasy points, which is what I was hoping for. It just didn't happen, and then he got hurt. The Nathaniel Hackett offense was terrible, and we all know Russell Wilson was also terrible as well. So maybe he was a little bit spared with that injury, and it seems like he's recovered properly. The fact that he's going at RB25 is amazing value. If he does stay healthy, he doesn't really have much competition in this offense. I'm not worried about Samaje Perine really in the slightest. And if he can put up 16, 17 games this season, I think he's absolutely going to finish well above running back 25. He could literally finish top 10. I'm not kidding you. I really believe in his upside. I think top 15 is a little bit more reasonable to project. And I have him, I want to say, as my RB16 in my rankings. I am not afraid to reach on him either. Love Javonte Williams. That's one of the main reasons why I wasn't drafting those round 6, round 5 running backs like Mattison, Cam Akers, Miles Sanders, because you can get guys like Javonte Williams a couple rounds later, and I really, really love his talent, especially in any type of PPR format, even half PPR. Going to see a ton of work in the passing game. He could possibly be this year's Alvin Kamara with 80-plus receptions. You know Sean Payton loves to use his pass-catching running back. So Javonte Williams, a must draft while you can get him. And I'm going to be very interested to see how high this ADP rises. I think he's really more of a 6th-round pick than a 7th-round pick where he is currently going. But we are coming up on the top, and I'm going to try and preserve some of the drama. But Leonard Fournette is going way too late. I've been able to draft him in round 18 sometimes, and an ADP of 198 is just insane to me. 73 catches last year, 69 the year before. Yes, it was with Tom Brady, but still, he offers such good pass protection, such good usage, and he could really go anywhere. It's possible that, a running back goes down, gets injured, and they pivot to Leonard Fournette. I think he's going to be really valuable. Maybe he doesn't get signed by week 1, but by the time we hit week 4, week 5, he's going to be one of the most heavily targeted running backs in free agency to fill in for whoever goes down with injury. So, yes, there is a little bit of risk that maybe he doesn't sign on a team. He is also getting a little bit older, but over 1,100 yards the last 2 seasons, and I don't think he's fallen off a cliff. I think he's really talented. He just wants to compete for a ring or get the best contract possible and get more usage on a team that's going to be much better than the Buccaneers. So he's not going to Tampa, and maybe he goes to Dallas. Maybe he goes to the Patriots. Maybe he goes to, the Bengals if Joe Burrow's injury is a little concerning. I do think Fournette will have a team by the time the season starts, and even if he doesn't, he will by the time we hit week 4, week 5. He will put up good numbers. I do think he's much more valuable than RB61. Definitely happy to take Leonard Fournette as my RB5, RB6 in best ball. But let's keep it moving. In the same vein, under the same logic, I have Ezekiel Elliott at 18%. His ADP has also been rising, especially since he practiced for the Patriots. I think people are starting to wise up. But it's literally the same fucking logic. It is the exact same logic with him and Leonard Fournette. They're both going to find a team, and he scored 12 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. He is an elite short yardage back, elite on the goal line. Excuse me, a little burp there, but that's really the upside we're chasing. We're looking for touchdowns. Zeke has that ability, and that is why I have taken him a ton. An ADP of 172, running back 54 off the board. If he does score 10-plus touchdowns like he did last season, there's a market for him. He will sign somewhere, and his ADP will be way higher than 172. Once that happens, I think it'll settle around like 120, 125, not much later than 130, in my opinion. If you're telling me tomorrow he signed with the Cowboys, he would absolutely move up about 50 spots in the ADP. So not afraid to take him at all, but we are getting very close to the top, and this is a player I absolutely love. Last year, he proved me wrong. I was not a believer in Breece Hall because he was on the Jets, and while their offensive line does worry me a little bit, holy shit, he was amazing last season. He was truly a league winner. It's very unfortunate that he did not stay healthy. That was the only reason why I kind of got bailed out when I told you not to draft Breece Hall last year, because holy shit, he was putting up 15.7 fantasy points, and only one game did he start and finish it as the starter for the Jets. He was splitting time considerably with Michael Carter, and I mean, his work in the passing game is something that could really pay dividends with Rodgers throwing him the ball 9 targets, 1 target, 11 targets, 6 targets. Elite usage, elite upside, and then his yards per carry were fucking ballistic. Like 5.8 was his average on only 80 carries. He could have potentially led the NFL as the rushing leader if he was able to finish the season fully healthy. So he can bust it to the house from anywhere. He has that true elite speed. While he has been on the PUP list, he has been clocked at 23 miles per hour already. And I think by the time we hit like week 3 of the preseason, I think Breece Hall will be back on the field. The Jets are expecting him to be ready for week 1, and I am not afraid of it. He has been falling in the ADP because of the Dalvin Cook rumors, but as of right now, that still has not happened, and I am praying it doesn't, because while he'd still be a top 10 running back, it wouldn't be as amazing as I think it could be. I think he could be a top 5 running back if he plays a full season and they don't add Dalvin Cook. That is really the upside that Breece Hall offers. I think he's also the reason why we saw Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs get drafted in the early first round. It's because Breece Hall went pick 4 of the second round last year, and the entire league was like, oh, we fucked up, didn't we? We let Breece Hall fall to the second and go to the Jets. Literally every single team in the NFL passed on Breece Hall last year, not named the Rams, who didn't have a first-round pick at all. But he was just so fucking good. As long as he stays healthy, as long as he's able to stay on the field, he's going to be top 10 at worst, and he has the potential to literally finish as the RB1, RB3, RB5. I love Breece Hall. That is why he is in the thumbnail of this video. But right above him, I have Elijah Mitchell. And I mentioned at the top, CMC is not a player I've been drafting a ton, but that doesn't mean I don't want to invest in the Kyle Shanahan 49ers backfield. If CMC were to ever go down, Mitchell would be a top 10 running back, a elite league winner. When he was the starter for the majority of 2021, he was averaging 100 rushing yards per game, and that's the potential that he has. He's not going to be as good as Christian McCaffrey. That's not the case. He's not as much of a elite pass catcher, but still he would have a ton of touches, ton of volume, and elite upside in this backfield. He's going as the RB43, pick 128, and you're chasing upside, you're gambling on underdog. That's why I draft Elijah Mitchell, because it's a bet against Christian McCaffrey. And you know what else is a bet against Derrick Henry? My Tyjae Spears exposure at 23.4%. Maybe he doesn't get any fucking work. Maybe I am really screwed with this investment because I've taken him a ton, but his ADP is so late, running back 56. That is the question that I posed to you, and I assume 4 people have answered it. 75%, 3 out of 4 people agree with me that Derrick Henry is not going to play a full season. We've brought up his stats briefly at the top of this video, but just to remind you, 2 seasons ago, when he only played 8 games, he was coming off a season where he had 397 touches. Last year, he had 382. He will be 29 this year. He will turn 30 in January, and it's very likely that he at least misses some time, and more likely than not, at the end of the season. And you know what else is really important in these underdog formats, especially if you're drafting in a tournament where the playoff schedule is somewhat relevant? Let me show you the schedule for the Tennessee Titans, because holy shit, they have an elite fantasy playoff schedule. Week 15 versus Houston, Week 16 versus Seattle, and Week 17 at Houston. So 2 games against Houston, 1 against Seattle. Let me just remind you real quick of how bad those teams were from a rushing standpoint defending the ball. The Texans ranked dead last, number 32 in the NFL, with 170 rushing yards per game allowed per game. That is a record-setting number. And then the Seahawks ranked 30th, third worst, at 150. So those matchups, if they hold from the stats of last season, would be elite league-winning upside. And even if it is Derrick Henry, whoever the Tennessee running back is in those final games is going to be a top 15 running back at worst. Tyjae Spears would immediately be the workhorse in this backfield because Hassan Haskins is dealing with legal trouble. I believe some assault and battery charges. So Tyjae Spears is a clear RB2, no competition behind him. And maybe Derrick Henry comes off the field a little bit. He is getting older. There is definitely a reason to limit his touches a little bit more. He's still going to get a lot. Don't get me wrong. It's not like Tyjae Spears is going to have weekly value. But there's no waiver wire. You can't make any additions on Underdog. You just have to draft whoever it is you want. And for all of those reasons that I've mentioned, Tyjae Spears is one of my most drafted running backs in this preseason. And let's just break down some of his stats real quick. Out of the University of Tulane, Tyjae Spears is very, very impressive. I am a little bit worried because he did go down with injury a few years ago. However, last year, his game log was really, really impressive. The last 3 games of the season, he had at least 200 yards from scrimmage per game, and he closed it out with 10 total touchdowns in his last 8 games, 12 total touchdowns in his last 9 games, 9 of which came in those final 4 games. So really, really elite numbers, 6.9 yards per carry. He can also catch passes multiple games with at least 5 receptions. So he can do it all. They drafted him in the 3rd round for a reason. I'm a firm believer that Tyjae Spears would have league-winning upside if anything were to happen to Derrick Henry, and it's not a bad bet to make that will happen. But we have reached the end of this video, and I am proud to say that my number 1 most drafted player at the running back position, even overall among all positions this season, is David Montgomery. I mentioned with Jahmyr Gibbs, 27 total touchdowns for this offense last season, and Montgomery profiles as the goal line back. He weighs 20, if not 25 pounds heavier than Jahmyr Gibbs, and similar logic. Those first 6 games are going to help you start 6-0, if not 5-1 in your redraft format, because there's no Jamison Williams, and they're going to lean on the run a little bit extra. Jahmyr Gibbs going to be running routes way more than in the backfield, and Dave Montgomery is probably going to be the RB1, at least to start the season, and probably for the entirety of this year. So RB23, I think, is absolutely his floor. He's going in the 7th round, but I was able to get him in round 8 a lot earlier this year, and I just can't move off of him. They have a top 5 offensive line, and if he's even close to what Jamaal Williams did last season, he could easily sniff 13, 14, 15 rushing touchdowns. He could be elite. I do believe in the Lions this year. I do think they're going to win their division. I think they're going to win at least 11 or 12 games. There's a chance they win 13, and if he stays healthy, Montgomery will at least be a top 20 running back. If Jahmyr Gibbs goes down, then Montgomery will be a top 10 running back with confidence. So those are my running back exposures through this preseason, and very, very happy to get this video out of the way. It's been a blast. I haven't had to edit this at all. I know I've avoided the comment section, but let's take a look. Tater Toddy, Ayo, it is time. It is indeed time. It is fucking time. And Randy Miller, see a 60-40 split with more valuable touches going to Bigsby. My concern is that Etienne fumbles like he did last year. Tank could get more work. Completely agree with you, Randy. Absolute elite upside with Tank Bigsby. Very valuable touches, especially on the goal line. I think he's going to be a big thorn in the side of Travis Etienne. But that's it for me. That's it for this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Let me know you enjoyed this, and help the channel grow. Help me out a little bit, and it's been fun. But this video is going on an hour and 9 minutes. A little bit long, but boy, we touched on a ton of players. I want to say I talked about 50 different running backs in this video. And so it's time for it to be over, and I will see you in the next one. We will do a live stream possibly tonight. We're going to enter the Chihuahua $4 draft. So if you're interested in that, I'll keep the lobby a little bit open as I set it up, and hopefully you can join me. Hopefully you can draft with me later tonight on the live stream. But that's it for me. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you very much for watching Nice and Blunt.